Bom dia, sejam bem-vindos à 14ª edição do Comunicar Design. O meu nome é Ana.
E o meu é João.
E somos finalistas do curso de Design Gráfico e Multimédia e vamos ser os vossos apresentadores nestes 3 dias.
Somos apenas uma pequena parte de um grande grupo que nos faz estar aqui hoje.
E até hoje este foi e continua a ser um projeto desenvolvido de forma extracurricular, motivado apenas pelo nosso amor pelo design. Queres que estejamos aqui perdidamente apaixonados no one night stand, ou se calhar as coisas até estão um bocado complicadas, sabemos que todos temos uma relação com o design, cada um à sua maneira e num estado diferente. O Comunicar Design XIV pede a todos que ponham os seus corações ao alto e que estejam prontos para uma escapadinha romântica de 3 dias. Este evento tem como objetivo único o acréscimo e ingredientes à vossa criatividade.
Aos clientes interessa ver o resultado, aos criadores interessa a humanidade de outros... Oi. Eu sabia que isto tinha que correr mal logo no início. Posso repetir? Vocês não se importam? Digam, pode? Ok, obrigado, já estou-me a sentir melhor. Aos clientes interessa ver os resultados, aos criadores interessa a humanidade de outros criadores. E é o que vos vamos trazer aqui nestes 3 dias de partilhas de histórias e experiências pela parte das pessoas convidadas. Para isso, podem consultar o programa que está lá fora, em frente à porta do auditório, e seguirem-nos no nosso Facebook e Instagram.
A edição 14 do Comunicar Design pretende elogiar os laços entre as pessoas em paralelo com a sua relação com o design. Queremos ouvir histórias de amor que cada um tem para contar.
E não se esqueçam, para ouvir respostas, há que colocar perguntas.
Antes de darmos início à primeira apresentação, queremos agradecer aos professores Afonso Figueiredo, Miguel Macedo e Paulo Silva por nos guiarem nesta viagem e ser o pilar deste evento. Também à colaboração dos professores Aprígio Morgado e Ricardo Santos. Um obrigado também aos nossos colegas de gráfico, que não estando aqui tão expostos, também fizeram parte da construção deste evento e tiveram um papel focal.
E sem esquecer a quem deu e vai continuar a dar, ao longo destes dias, um grande apoio à direção da escola, ao Paulinho, ao Ricardo, à Anabela Monteiro, à Vera, ao Sérgio Dantas e ao Sérgio Veloso e aos seus colaboradores. Uma salva de palmas, por favor. Como atividades integrantes neste evento, durante o dia poderão deliciar-se no nosso snack bar, esse sabor a ti, e comprar uns mimos na feira e tudo o que eu te dou, com a tradicional presença de publicações e objetos de autor e merchandising do nosso comunicar. E já agora tentem a vossa sorte na nossa quermesse.
Também este ano, nós e os nossos colegas voltamos a apresentar os nossos trabalhos nas exposições de ilustração intitulada Sei de Cor Cada Traço, a design gráfico, com o nome Deito Quase Tudo, as letras do teu nome, tipografia e o segmento de apresentação de trabalhos de fotografia designado Eternamente Tu. Não deixem de ver o que melhor se produz nesta escola. Vamos dar início ao nosso programa, mas antes de mais e para começar, temos connosco o diretor da escola, o professor João Santos, que fará um pequeno comentário e enquadramento deste evento na instituição. Uma salva de palmas.
O meu está abençoado.
Tá bom? Tá. Bom dia, o enquadramento é simples. Há 14 anos começou o Comunicar Design aqui, eu tenho vindo a quase todos e este deve ser o primeiro ano em que vou falhar porque não consigo estar mais do que 5 minutos aqui, o que é bom para vocês. Quero agradecer à organização, a todos os estudantes que conseguiram fazer isto, a todos os professores que conseguiram fazer isto, à paciência que tiveram para aturar as minhas relutâncias e resistências que são obrigatórias para quem está do meu lado. É com muita emoção que eu espero que vocês me vejam daqui para fora, para isto começar rapidamente. Um bom Comunicar Design para todos, isto é muito importante para vocês, é muito importante para a escola, que continue sempre e que seja a melhor semana desta semana e do ano.
Então, em relação aos convidados, hoje temos as apresentações de Evelin Kasikov, vinda da Estónia, para estar connosco, e dos conhecidos Solid Dogma, com a presença de Pedro Pires. Da parte da tarde teremos um workshop com a Evelin sobre o tema Embroidery Design. Podem consultar as informações nos nossos programas e também no Facebook e no Instagram.
Damos então início a este primeiro dia e abrimos o nosso auditório para a nossa primeira convidada. Nascida na Estónia, a artista e designer Evelin Kasikov tem atualmente o seu estudo em Londres, especializado em tipografia e design editorial. A sua abordagem ao craft conecta-se sempre com o design gráfico, com os seus designs matematicamente precisos, mas no entanto criados à mão, sendo conhecido o seu trabalho de impressão manual em semic através do bordado. Passa por experimentação com grelhas, tipografia e outras técnicas de design, com um processo tanto analógico como digital.
Let's not waste more time. Please, big welcome and applause to Evelin.
Thank you. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you to all of you who's here today. It's really exciting to be here, so thank you for inviting me to Comunicar Design Festival. And just to start a little bit about myself, so my name is Evelin. I am originally from Estonia, which is a really small country up northeast of Europe. And I do believe that my background really has everything to do with the kind of work I produce. So I grew up with, by the sea and with the nature. And the slow methods of hand embroidery require certain mindset, and I believe that this is where it comes from. And now I live in London, and I have lived and worked in southeast in Greenwich, in London for almost 10 years. And these are some of my books that I have designed and also made. And when I was asked to present my work here today, I started to collect images and ideas, and I realized that they're all connected to books somehow. So today I'm going to share my journey in book design and show the different ways I work with books. And my relationship with books began long time ago, decades ago. These are Estonian children's books that I had when I was growing up. And I didn't realize that at the time, obviously, but looking at them now, they are really striking illustrations, and nothing about it is like branded for children or deliberately made for children. There are no like gender-specific images that something is made for girls or boys. They're just really beautiful illustrations. And they were made by the artists of the day who were exhibiting artists. They created their work in watercolor and gravure and painting, and they also illustrated books. So this is how I started to appreciate the beauty of the book. And I really loved them as a child. And many of these artists ended up being my tutors at the Estonian Academy of Art when I studied for my BA there. And after I graduated, I happened to work in advertising. And I worked as an art director and designer for almost 10 years. And just to quickly show you, this is the kind of work I did back then. And it shows that designers' work really can change a lot over time. And work at the full-time agency is really sort of full speed, full on, really commercial. And after having done that like many years, I think I just started to feel increasingly unhappy with the disposable nature of the work. Commercial design often does not have any lasting value. And I wanted to create work that had deeper meaning and that was timeless and that was beautiful. And none of this was going to happen in the advertising context. So I knew that if I wanted to grow as a designer and if I wanted to make a change, I have to do it now. So I made the bravest decision of my life, and in 2006 I quit the safety of my job and I moved to London to become a student again. And I started my MA at Central St. Martin's. And there I started experiment with craft. And there was really no obvious or logical reason for me to work with craft. I think the idea, first of all, started because having been working in front of a screen for many years, I was looking for some more tactile, physical approach to design. But I didn't know what I was doing or why I was doing it. Although I knew very well what I didn't want my craft work to be. So craft is usually perceived as something very feminine, very decorative. And I wanted to go to the opposite direction. So if I was to do something with craft, it had to be not decorative at all, not feminine, not girly, not pretty, and also not random. Because I can't imagine doing myself something free-flowing or freehand. It has to be based on a system. And often people ask, well, how did you know how to stitch? And again, this is just something I grew up with. This is a tablecloth made by my grandmother. And craft has a really strong tradition in Estonia. So if you are a girl, people teach you this at school and at home. And I just already know all these techniques, although I never thought of them in the design context. And these are my very early experiments. So for instance, I thought, okay, if I was to do something with lace, like cut work, white work technique, what would that be? And this is the different weights of the Frutiger font. And when you turn it to keyline, the outline, the dots become visible. And I thought that, that's maybe perfect to create these bridges. When in cut work, you cut some of the fabric away and the object is held together with embroidered bridges. So that was my lace experiment. Or what happens if you turn grid into some soft and organic substance? So really abstract experiments. But they led me to the idea that what I can do with craft is that I'm going to apply my specific graphic approach to very traditional techniques. So I design everything on a computer, but then I also use handmade techniques to make it. I use both digital and handmade methods in my work. And the first project that grew out of these ideas was one big experiment. It was the first set of books I ever designed, and it was my graduation project at Central St. Martin's. It's a set of 4 books where I first look at the ideas of craft and graphic design together. And it started with a simple idea. I thought that I wanted to work with structures and systems somehow. And I asked myself, what happens if you could make the structure of color visible, if you could see inside colors and see inside the layers and touch the structure of color? And this is how I came up with the technique that I call CMYK embroidery, which is a really simple idea. It's based on the 4-color printing process where the full range of colors can be achieved by mixing 3 subtractive primaries with black. And I turned this into cross-stitch. And the idea of using cross-stitch happened really quickly because they're both based on the square shape. So this is how in print the image is made of tiny dots. That are arranged at certain screen angles. And I knew this from my background as a graphic designer, so what I did, I turned this into cross-stitch screens, and when these are overlaid, the same effect happens. And here you can see how it looks when it's stitched. And the intensity of color is achieved by using 10 strands of thread for darker color and 1 for lighter. So you should get a pretty similar effect when in print. And my tools, so I use color. I just walked into a department store to see if there is color thread available in these colors, and there was, so that was perfect. And different needles. And that's the set of books. It's called Printed Matter quite simply because it is about print. And the 4 books are based on a golden section format when each book relates to the next as part of Fibonacci series. And I wanted to use this method to emphasize the idea that what I do with craft is not random and it's based on system. And as the content sort of grows from micro to macro, like the process, the start of the project, and the elements, type, and biggest image, then it's reflected in the form. So the first one is documentation of the making of the project, the small book, and they were the first books I ever bound as well. So, and I chose this quote by a ceramic artist Edmund de Waal as a motto for my work, because he's another hero of mine. I really love his work, and what he does is, it's been said, it's like pottery in Bauhaus spirit. It's not ceramics as we know it. And the idea that craft can be something else, that today we don't work with craft because we make objects that we need, that craft can be used to create experiences and to create beauty. That's the my final year of the MA, month by month what I did, documented in the book, and also all the papers and threads that I used, like little catalogs. Then element, a book that documents the elements in the work, the pixels and the crosses. Typography, which is French folded, so that you can see the back sides as well. And some of the letter forms I created from squares, and then I stitched them. And also quotations about seeing and perception. So, where does the illusion comes from is that one. And then the image book, which is all about color perception. It's based on landscape photography, but it's all very abstract. So here the gray square should look slightly different depending on the surrounding color, and how to create perspective in image with cross-stitch screens. And the opposite colors should make quite similar gray tone when mixed in the middle. So, color perception. And it was quite a race against time to get it all done, because an MA has a very definitive end, which is a degree show. So, but I didn't have an experience of doing this, so I didn't know how much it would take to make books. And I ended up stitching at airports and whenever I could. So Tallinn airport looks a lot nicer these days. It was 10 years ago. And that is the bookmark that comes with the books, where an inch by inch square is cut out, which allows to measure screen resolution. So you can see that my resolution is very, very low compared to the actual print. And when I graduated, I had this nice project, but it didn't really immediately turn into a job. It went straight to blogs and magazines, and it got lots of features, but there was no work coming in. And the first approaches I got from commissions were quite shocking, actually. There was someone who said that, oh, I have these 5 t-shirts, can you make me a logo, stitch logo? And, you know, I said, what? I mean, how can you look at my work and think that this is what I do? And I realized something from the very early on, that it's very important to say no sometimes. And I've said no to lots of projects that are not right for me, or that require something that is simply substandard, that is not the level of work that I create. And it's important to me to be the author of the work and to design the piece. I'm not a producer. I don't stitch someone else's designs. And I needed, of course, a job. So what I did, it was 2008, really bad time, the big financial crash, and no one was hiring. I started to approach publishers because I loved book design. I wanted this to be sort of my future. And I started to approach publishers whose work I liked. And the first little job I got from Phaidon was to make book dummies. So big publishers, they run these sales conferences when they make dummies of upcoming books, which are made of cardboard with a few sheets of book content on top. So I made those. I carried with 2 IKEA bags to their office, and yeah, they're really big because the Phaidon books are like huge. Soon enough, they let me design books as well. So this is how I got into book design, and I learned a lot there. I thought my MA was pretty hard work, but I had to rethink it. The amount of attention that goes into fine-tuning all the details, that is really amazing. And I got the appetite of doing things properly and designing books properly. And also the illustrations slowly started to find me. So I've done quite a lot of editorial illustrations as well with needle and thread. So here the lettering is made to look like a house built from blocks. This was an actual cushion that I made for The Guardian. Here the brief was to do something with Christmas trees. It's a Christmas edition, and Christmas tree is something which I found really difficult to work with. And at first I wanted to offer quite abstract ideas, but they didn't go down too well. So the final design is still grid-based, still quite minimal, but they look a lot more like trees. And the final file is put together from this, so I didn't stitch everything. It wasn't possible. The timings are really, really tight always, so you have maximum like a week for a project, and you just can't make things with this timeline. And that was for the Financial Times, where the idea of the article is that human beings need each other in order to survive. And I came up with the idea of connected brains to illustrate this. And by then, I was already designing lots of books for publishers like Bloomsbury, and I felt the need to reconnect with my ideas that I explored during my MA. So I wanted to do something for myself again, and that's a little side projects that I did for fun. So they're not actual books, they are book objects that play and twist with the idea of perception, screen and print. And I photographed RGB screen to see it up close. And then I turned it into my touch screen and stitched it. So that's the quite literal touch screen that is iPad size, and you can hold it in your hand. Then the empty signal, the TV page, that is overlaid on a book spread. And this is a lake in Scotland, which I pixelated. So a lot of my work seems to be about having fun in Photoshop. And then these pixels were stitched and made into a book. And this is how it all came together. A lot of cutting and gluing. And now I wanted to share one process of creating an actual book cover to reveal what it's like to work with the publisher and what it's like to work on a commission project. Because book design tends to be quite an invisible profession, and you don't necessarily know what the process is like. You can't read about it anywhere. And the actual length of the process and the many ideas that are explored during that, it's something that I wanted to show. So this is the book, Do It Like a Woman and Change the World, for Granta, publisher in London. And when the brief came in, I was really happy because it seemed like a perfect match, that they like my work for all the right reasons, and they like the contemporary aspect, and it could be perfect for the young feminist author. And I started by looking at other books in that genre. What do they look like? What sort of images they use? Because book cover design is a commercial venture. There is an audience, and it has to be created with a specific audience in mind. And looking at this, I realized that there is a lot of like femininity going on. It's all very feminine, very pink. And maybe this book could be typographic and bolder and simpler. So the first idea that I presented was this. I wanted to make lettering myself, not just stitch an existing font. And maybe the pink aspect could be like really bold neon color on the background. And well, it was liked, but not enough to go for it. And I did also different color variations. I showed how the lettering will be constructed. I showed how the lettering will look like when it's actually stitched. And well, the feedback came back that, okay, it's not quite there, and we really want all the letters, all the words have the same weight. And then I started looking at ways to do that. And they also liked the CMYK cross-stitch thing, which is something that I'm often approached for. So I started to look at ways to arrange all the letters the same size, and maybe subtitle and title could have the same weight. And these are the CMYK cross-stitch patterns, so I had to figure out what can go next to what, and which ones work as a color and which ones are maybe too messy. And that's not stitched, that's put together in Photoshop, just dropped patterns into letters. And it wasn't still there. It was, the email came back that, okay, we really need the title to go big and not the subtitle. But that didn't look good, so I tried to do it, but it wasn't going to work because woman is quite a long word for a narrow book cover, and if all the words are the same size, they are quite small. So, and I also did a new technical draft as well to show how slightly overlapped stitched letters can work. And by that time, they already realized that they are asking too much and it's just not going anywhere. And I thought that, okay, should I stop there? But then I think it's very easy to run away. It's the easiest thing to do. But it's a lot harder to actually work it out and start again and actually make it happen. So I thought that, okay, I'm going to give it another try. And then I thought, the next idea, okay, the book is very sort of raw and honest, and maybe the lettering could be something done by hand with a broad brush or something heavier. And I also, I was told that the feminine aspect was sort of lacking. So I did this draft of a woman's eye, which was completely horrible. And I think by the time the design was completely derailed, that was never going to be the cover. But sometimes you just have to explore different ideas to know what works and what doesn't. And then the feedback came that, you know, we really need to get this done. Let's just keep going. And after a while, I showed them the new draft that actually went back to the beginning. And I said that, look, it's really not going to work if all the words in title are the same. We need to emphasize something. And I think do it is the part that needs emphasizing. So that was what I presented to them. And that was it. So they absolutely loved it. And finally, the cover was approved. Because it's quite difficult to work with so many sides, like the publisher, the author, maybe the agents, maybe the creative side within publisher. So there are many sides in the project. So this is how I started working on the final cover. It's made in InDesign, the crosses, and then printed out and embroidered. So that's the final front and back. And then the tiniest details all had to be fine-tuned. So this is the threads that come out of the last word. And they were rearranged many, many times. So even the tiniest details can spark feedback. And the book was supposed to have flaps at first. It didn't at the end. So now I arrived at the task of creating the full cover layout. Many versions of that as well. And the simplest one with the lines was finally chosen, which was my favorite too. So that's the final book. And it had really nice finishes. So the raised embossed surface really emphasized the idea that it's embroidered. So that's the author signing the books at the book launch, but it was quite a long process from the brief to the moment when the happy author is signing her books. And this book as a form is now my ongoing project that I work on whenever I have time. And also it's based on something that is quite old. This is an experiment I did at Central St. Martin's. And I wanted to see what happens if you use only cross-stitch to bind book signatures. And I didn't do anything with it back then, but it remained at the back of my mind, so I wanted to pick it up sometime, and now I have. So I've managed to do 3 by now, but I'm planning to do many more. And so the trick with these bindings is that it's taken apart and put together again using only cross stitch. So embroidery is not the decoration, but it is the actual structure that is holding the signatures together. This is the first one, Alphabets, which was a book that a journalist who came to interview me, she gave me this as a present. And I had it for a long time, and I decided it's time to do something with it. And the inspiration for the thread colors comes from beige colors that are very nice and delicate and pastel colors. So this is the designed spine before making it. And that's how it works. So the book is all cut into signatures, all the thread removed, and then I mark my new design on spine and I make it. And the next one is the Sea Survivors, which I bought from a bookshop in Greenwich. And I've lived in Greenwich many years, and Greenwich has a long maritime history. So I thought that maybe my next book could come from that area. And this bookshop has this little desk with the sort of sad, discarded £1 books that no one wants. So I picked up one from there, and I decided to give it a new life and make it beautiful. This is the selection of thread, the sea colors. And here is the new spine design where the lettering, I wanted to make it float like the sort of survivors in the sea. Yeah? And the third one I've managed to do is the structure of art, where I wanted to use the modernist colors, the red, yellow, and blue, and design a new cover for it. And I didn't steal it from the college library. It was discarded and free to take. So that's the book being cleaned from its previous cover. And this is how I work out the design, that what's done is crossed out and what's left to do, so that I know where I am with the spine stitching. And here it is in progress. And attaching covers. And this one currently I'm working on is called Das grüne Gewölbe, which is also an old book. And I had it as a child, and when I was at art school as a child, my parents bought me art books, but Estonia was part of Soviet Union back then, so the only books available, they either came from Russia or the friendly republics. So Das grüne Gewölbe is an art museum in Dresden that was in Eastern Germany. It's the Green Vault in English. And so that's my next book that is waiting for its new life. And for lettering, I wanted to create something distinctly German. So I looked at fracture shapes, black letter shapes, and did something with it, like the new title. And that is currently in progress. But it's not very far yet. I haven't had enough time. And finally, I wanted to show a project where book becomes an artist book, which is my biggest project to date. It was a bit too big and too heavy to bring it here, but it took me nearly 6 years to complete, and I did it really for no other reason than I really, really wanted to. And it's a book about print, and the cover printed without ink, and the cover details all the elements that are used in book. So it really acts like a visual key to what's going on inside. So that there are 4 colors, there are 400 combinations, and I use 4 types of cross size, and there are over 200,000 stitches. So how did I know how many stitches I made? Because it's all designed on a computer. There is a record of it. And I calculated all the paths. So I think it was, yes, 4. You make 4 stitches to make 1 cross. So I added all this up, and they are all linked files in InDesign. So I knew how many times I had linked 25% magenta. So I added this all up. And basically that's how that's the system of calculating it. And that's how I came to the final number that was over 200,000. And all of it is stitched. There's no ink in the book. Every line, every letter, every cross, all of it. And it's called XXXX Watch Book, not because it's X-rated or anything, but it's the shape of the cross, and that simply became the title of it. That's the title page. Looks kind of untidy up close, but I wanted to create a transition from one color to the next with lines. Title pages, so I finished it last year. And it is essentially a catalog of color in a very similar way that Pantone color guide is. And the idea first came to me when I was working on this cushion project for The Guardian many years back, and I was given this color palette that was the like predetermined colors for that issue. And they asked me, like, can you do CMYK cross stitch with it? And the honest answer was I didn't know, because there's not much difference between these two, for instance, and does it even show in the CMYK cross stitch? So I thought that, that wouldn't it be amazing to have like my very own stitched Pantone guide that I can refer to when I need to know what colors work. I didn't do it back then, but again, the idea remained with me, so I picked it up, and I started looking at other systems than Pantone. Is there anything I can use as a basis for this project? Is there like a pre-existing system like Mansell? And I didn't find one, because the problem is that there is not much difference between the shades, and embroidery takes so much time. It had to be efficient somehow, so that all swatches are distinctly different and they are unique, and it makes sense to make all of them. So if I was to make stitch swatches with 5% difference, it was just a lot of wasted work, and it would have looked all the same. So that didn't work for me. And then I devised my own system that I'm going to use what percentages and what strands of threads to achieve different percent of color. So there are 4 categories, no more. And then I had to design all of it on a computer, so it was quite a lot of work. So this is a page from the InDesign file with all the numbers and screens in place. And here you can see what they look like. So if that's the colors on screen and compared to the final embroidered page from the book. It's not too far off, but not too similar either. And then I had to stitch them, like all 400 of them. And again, the pages traveled to everywhere with me, so much to the amusement of stewardesses on planes. And that's the final set. This is stitching ready on the couch, ready to pick up whenever I have a moment. And the book in progress. And here you can see all those pages laid out on the floor, ready for binding. And the book has 4 sections. So elements, color groups, and common color names, and finally the transitions. So the first about 200 is the different elements for primary, secondary, and so on colors. And here you can see the back side. I left it open because I wanted it to be visible as well. So every spread has this in-between sheet with the values written on it in pencil, and then you can open the page and see the back side. So this is the brightness and saturation section, combinations of these. And yeah, they do make, when you squirt your eyes, they do really make different colors when you look at them. And then there is a section about black. In printing, there is something known as rich black when parts of other colors are added to make black really, really deep. And I wanted to see how this works in the stitching. Because thread is not transparent, they will look different. So here, black is the top layer, this is black, but this is also black. So I rotated the order of the layers to create different kinds of black. And that's the system. So altogether, between 4 colors, there's 24 combinations. And here they all are stitched. So none of them looks like black as we know it, but in fact they all are. Then there are groups of color. The next one with oranges, reds, yellows, greens. There's purple, violet as well. And the last 2 are neutral, like gray, and pastel. And this kind of works quite well, so you can really see the gradation from one color to the next. And then common color names. I really wanted to make a section where you can see how, like really well-known color names like lime green or navy blue, how do they look? And when I was looking at, I researched it, again, there was no frame of reference because they are different from culture to culture and from country to country. So there was not single one system I could base my work on. So I started just creating my own colors and based on my own experiences. So the dark blue is the night in Greece on a holiday a few years back. And that was to become my midnight blue. Or historic well-known colors. So Mountbatten pink, which was used by British Royal Navy in the World War II. So it was a camouflage color. Apparently these pink planes, they were not visible to the enemy against clouds. So what would that look like in the CMYK? And then more common colors like orchids and purples and ruby red, carrots, apricots, gold, and blue water. This is a forest in Estonia, so my forest green comes from that. And also the very delicate neutral colors like gray and champagne pink. So I wanted to create a variety of those. And that's page from the book. So all the spreads have different arrangements. The grid is the same, but the way the squares are arranged, it varies quite a bit. Some are fuller, some are emptier. Because I wanted to treat the book as a book design project as well, not just embroidery. So it had to be designed as a normal book. And then finally, transitions of color, gradients. So this is my stitched Venn diagram. That's what it looks like in reality, and that's the overlaid sections. So the circles intersect in all possible ways, and the back side of it. And then combinations of 2 and 3 primaries. And stitched. Then linear gradients, how they blend. So the book is very technical. It's more about mathematics really than embroidery. 1 color, 2 color gradients, and little squares. So this is how the color transition looks like before half toning it. And here they are stitched. And then finally rainbow. And rainbow is not something you can touch or turn into tactile, but I wanted to give it a try. So the 7-fold rainbow color from red to green is then made into cross stitch. And this is the final spread from the book where you can see this rainbow transition across spread. And that wasn't the final rainbow in the book, because I wanted to create a similar color blend on the spine and on the foredge as well. So on the this is how I bound it. It's my handmade makeshift bookbinding frame. It's not bought from anywhere. It's not proper. I just made it for myself. And it starts from blue, so yellow becomes more and more denser, and then on the other end it's red. So it sort of works in the similar way. And that's the final spine. And the same happens on the foredge of the book, from blue to yellow to red. And I think that's it. That's all from me. So, if you have any questions about massive stitching projects, then...
Perguntas? É lá.
Hi, Evelin. Thanks for being here today. I have 2 questions. First, you work on such a specific technique and such a complex process. My question is, you work with someone else, so the process can be faster? No?
No, I work by myself, and everything I do when I design books, I design them myself. When I stitch something, I stitch it myself.
Okay.
So, no help.
The second question is, nowadays you have to do one on another design work not connected with embroidery, or you just do embroidery works?
No, I design books. I'm a book designer, and I do these experimental things with embroidery as well, and sometimes they overlap. Sometimes I'm commissioned to do embroidered sort of book illustrations, but no, embroidery is not the only thing I do for a living. I don't think it's possible.
Okay.
No.
Okay, thank you.
So at the beginning, you showed some illustrations from books that you saw, but your work is very abstract.
Yes.
Have you ever tried to make something more inspired by illustrations?
That's a really good question, because illustration has to illustrate something. So no one can look at my work and ask me to illustrate, I don't know, crisis in Europe or something, because they don't see in my work that kind of level of reality, if you wish. So, well, I have tried, and currently there is one project in the works that is book that is quite political, and I have illustrated that, not all in thread, but also like graphic illustrations. So I am trying, but I think abstraction and letter form creation is more like my thing. And you can show some themes with the shapes of letter forms as well, so you don't have to literally draw something. So I think typographic illustration is more my theme, really.
Mais alguém?
Hi. I got a little curious. You said you work alone, but do you have like a studio? You work at home?
I work from home. My home and studio is the same, because I often move between two countries. I still go back to Estonia quite often. This is my home country, so it doesn't really make sense to rent a studio in London if I'm not there most of the time, so, or a lot of the time. So yeah, I work from home. Yeah.
Okay, I have another question. We are finishing college this year, and I'm interested in knowing what made you make the decision to move to London. Like, I understood you went to college, but
yes, that was the decision. Yeah.
Yes, but why didn't you stay at your home country, and why did you choose to move, and how did that influence your work, and what did you learn from that experience?
Oh, it influenced me in a big way, and I wanted to study. I wanted to study because it's a huge investment to quit your job and to take time out for studying. So I wanted to study at a good school and the best I can possibly get into. So I applied to design schools in London, and I knew what kind of work they were producing, because I went to see degree shows many years before, to make the right decision that, okay, this course is right for me and it would be useful for me. So yeah, when I got into Central St. Martin's, I was just really happy, because it's one of the best places in the world where you can study design, I think. So yeah, and that everything changed there, so they must have done something right.
Thank you.
Mais alguma?
Hello.
Hello.
Thanks for being here. And I would like to ask you, what type of paper do you use when you do your embroiderment?
Sorry, what typography I use?
No, what type of paper?
What type of paper? It depends. For instance, when I did this big book, I had to find something that is firm enough that it doesn't break on the fold, because some papers are really just so soft, the printmaking papers especially, that they just fall apart when you handle them. So I look at the specs of the paper. Is it archival quality so that it doesn't turn yellow over time? Because if you do this massive work and the paper is rubbish, there's no point in it. And also grammage is the word. So how heavy it can be. I find it's really difficult to stitch on something that is 200, 300 grams weight. It's too heavy. So I tend to use lighter paper stocks. But you can stitch on anything, really.
Okay, thank you.
Mais alguma? Não? Thank you, Evelyn. Uma salva de palmas, por favor.
Perdoa se peço demais. Teus olhos em mim são fatais. Perdoa se me quero dar. Quem mandou a tua luz me enfeitiçar?